I'm going to start with a question for Mia. I mean, the film is called Bergman Island, so let's just talk about the place first, about Fårö. And what came first for you? The story, this place?
No, it wasn't the place that came first. Actually, I think first came the idea of making a film about a couple of directors. But that idea was with me during many years, and I think I waited for the right time. And that happened when when the idea of Fårö came. That's when the film became real to me. Suddenly, it was really like a match. I mean, between a place and an idea for a film. So I went there, I think it was in 2014 or 15 the first time, and after that I went there actually every year during 5 years. But the first time when I came, I already had the idea of a film, but I wasn't sure about how it would be when I confront my fantasy of Fårö to the real experience of it. And I went there and I met Hampus, who you see in the film. He plays his own part somehow. And he's the only one who does that, actually. And I'm really happy that he agreed.
So he's basically playing himself.
Yes, that's why I kept his name, to make it really clear that it's really him. No, but I went there and I was showing one of my film, and he was moderating the Q&A, and he actually drove me around the island. And I think it's really that meeting with him that was a decisive step for me. That's when the film started to really become real, and the machine of fiction really started when I met him.
Can you say a bit more about how this place spoke to you and how it, crystallized your ideas? I'd also love to hear Vicky and Anders talk about Fårö, because I think as much as anything, it's a film about a couple, a relationship, a creative process, but it's also a film about a place, I think.
Yes, I think places have always played a very crucial role in my writing since ever I started making films. Like they are almost a mother of fiction for me. And Fårö, I mean, of course, like as for many directors, Fårö had been a source of fantasy for me because of being connected to Bergman and because of the history of love there is between Fårö and Bergman. But I think, of course, it's not the only purpose. It's really, again, when I went there and I discovered, I mean, there was this place haunted by Bergman, and it is the case. You really feel Bergman's presence, and that was, of course, in the heart of my inspiration. But there was also another Fårö where I could find a space for myself, for my own writing. And I think the magical for me was that. It was both. It was, on the one hand, it was Bergman's Fårö. It was his island haunted by, his presence and his work and the films that he had been shooting there. But on the other hand, there was a poesy in Fårö and a certain beauty that I felt was still an experiment, like a virgin territory. It felt, because the Fårö you see in Bergman's film is his Fårö. It's really influenced by his own demons, his own his interiority. And when you go to the place, you see another place. And
yours is very different from
mine.
his.
Exactly, I think mine is actually very different. And I realized when I went there the first time that there was a territory for me to explore that somehow Bergman had not explored, and that thanks to that I could find my own, my own language, my own territory.
Vicky and Anders, do you want to say a little bit about Fårö and what that place was like to work in, to shoot? Did you know it before you made the film? Or?
I had never been to Fårö. I felt like I knew the place through watching Bergman's films, but it's, as Mia says, when you get there, you are immediately struck by this special atmosphere that the place has. It's partly because of the landscape and the light, and I think Mia and Denis Lenoir, the cinematographer, have captured that atmosphere in a very beautiful way. But I think speaking as an actor, I also felt that we were standing a little bit in the shadow of Bergman, or it's you kind of feel his ghost being there someplace, but you don't want to make a film that imitates him or emulates him. You want to make a new film, contemporary, fresh story, and I think that was important for us as well, at least for me, to discover my own Fårö, and I went horseback riding a lot. It's a very, very beautiful way to explore both Fårö and Gotland. And the French producer was getting more and more nervous that I would fall off the horse at some point. But I did it still. I even took Mia Wasikowska for a ride, and yeah, so that was my way of exploring Fårö on my own.
You never took me. You didn't even ask me. I never knew you went riding. I love horse riding.
I was part of the plan not to bring you.
He spends more time with me, I have to say, as you see in the film.
Yeah. Well, I was probably busy with my kids, which is true. So what was the question? Just Fårö, okay. Like always, I didn't think before going there, because I usually don't think. I do afterwards, but I don't before. And I just went there open to whatever that place would be. And I remember that it was very strong. It reflected to me in a very strong way as we have a really great German word, which is Sehnsucht. So, and we also have a word called Sehnsuchtsort, so a place of Sehnsucht. And Sehnsucht is like a mixture of longing and missing. So it's like you long for something you've known before maybe, or something you might know one day, but you don't know. It's quite melancholic, but more positive. Anyway, so it's like this is the kind of feeling you have, I find, a lot on that island. And I think it's also in Bergman's movies a lot, this kind of feeling when it just doesn't, you don't, you're like married and you have a house and you have a family and everything, but there's something you don't know. And so to me, the island was really like a lot about this general feeling, which I used a lot because in the first year we shot without Tim. And so I had to explore the island really without my husband, and I didn't know who was going to be my husband. So I couldn't, think of someone. So I tried to concentrate on the island. And then this thing came up, what you just said, of the ghost. And I must agree, like there's this thing, like there is like a kind of Bergman ghost there. But I just cannot say it. It's very strong when you're there, and especially, of course, when you see his like interior and his fridge and where he would have breakfast and his toilet, and it's like it's pretty weird because all the places are still there. So I think the island to me was like a dialogue, an inner dialogue with this kind of Bergman ghost, but then also this feeling of longing, missing, Sehnsucht feeling.
So you shot in 2 parts. Was there a reason for that?
Oh, yeah, it was the weirdest shooting, but ever for me, but also the happiest, actually. I think, I shot in 2 parts. It's a too long story, but we had to shoot in 2 parts because Vicky arrived very late on the film, and we had to postpone the shooting a bit, so I could still shoot the first part with with Mia and Anders and some scenes with Vicky, but I had to wait 1 more year to shoot the second part, which is actually the first part of the film. But now when I see the film, sometimes I don't even know which one I shot, which year. It's like it got really.
That's kind of appropriate for the film.
Yeah, it's better. I guess. But so I ended up spending so much time there, and I actually I have to say that my experience of writing and working on Fårö is very different from the one you see of Chris, because for me it was the easiest and experience ever of writing. Like Chris describes how painful it is for her to write, and it is for me too, actually, most of the time, except for the time when I wrote this film. And I still don't understand why it was so easy, actually. But I really had the feeling when I was there on the island writing the script that some doors were open thanks to the magic of this place, really.
So, you know, Mia, in many of your films, you've often drawn on aspects of your life, you know, used it as material to create fiction. This is the first time you've had a central character who is a filmmaker. So, this invitation to, you know, read autobiography or to read a certain personal investment in the material, how did you navigate that with this film?
I think it's probably part of why it took me more time. I mean, I've had the idea of the film for really long ago, but it took me some years to be able to really make a script out of that, because I knew it was going to be more frontal than my previous films. They were all extremely personal, and you can see them somehow autobiographical, although they are not really direct. I mean,
Not
it's
literal.
not that simple. but I knew this one was going to look more than the previous one, because for the first time I was dealing with a character who was going to be a female director, just like me. But on the other hand, I never came to Fårö with the father of my child. So I mean, it is the same and it is different. At the end, I think it's really about what's inside, and I can say the film is extremely personal, but not so much because of the form and the storyline, more because of what it tries to say.
Vicky, did you see yourself as playing a version of Mia or not?
You're the first person asking me this question. I mean, she did say that in her movies she's always often relating to her own life, but it's not being her own life. So I did know about it, and I did think about it a little bit, but most of it, what is interesting now that we have all these interviews or like thinking about it, I realized that it's true. I felt like a connection, but what she said is true. It's more about what the film is trying to say. Like, it's more like some kind of eternal, internal, whatever that is. Like whatever she felt, I could feel, and I think Mia was feeling too. So I could see it in the three of us. I could feel it in the three of us. But it's not something I really actually understand. It's more like we have the same way of, maybe we carry the same kind of like weight sometimes, or just like how to live, you know, what is life, and how to be a woman, how to become a person, how to be an artist, how to find your way. You know, I think it's very personal to the three of us.
I'm just going to ask one more, and then we'll take maybe one or two from the audience. It's something that relates to this point is just the structure of the film. You know, to have a fiction that kind of takes over the film, and it's interesting that we have Vicky playing Chris in the framing story, and then Anders in the nested story. So can you talk a bit about? I think obviously it works very well with what the film is about, but like, can you talk about just arriving at this structure?
What I can say is that it was something theoretical for me. It's never something I decided like, oh, it would be intellectually, you know, challenging or to do that. It's just, my quest as I was writing was, I was trying to really capture what inspiration is for me, how it works or doesn't work, but what I'm doing as a writer, mixing the fiction with reality to a point that it brings to a certain vertigo almost. Sometimes I don't even know where I am and who I am. Sometimes I feel like I'm more the person of my films than the person I am in my everyday life. It really brings me to a certain confusion, because I always work in the way I write. I always mixed so much my private life with my stories, and so I wanted to try to find the right form in order to capture that confusion that I want to create, that I enjoy. I actually enjoy that confusion, and I also want to understand why I enjoy it so much. So and while I was doing this, came that idea, not that as an idea, but really like something obvious, that I needed to actually go into her story, and that her story would say who was like going to be the other part of herself. Was her story that she was trying to write was going to say what was the process of writing for her, but was also going to say all the things that I couldn't say in the first part of the film. It's like a flip, it's like the other side of the same person, and both having a dialogue with each other.
We don't have much time left, but I'm going to try to take 2 quick audience questions. So if we could make them concise, and if you could project, that would be great. Right here in the front. Subversive tendencies regarding the Bergman legacy.
Or honoring.
Yeah.
I think it's, thanks for asking this, because I think it's really both. I think the film is really both. Because on the one hand, I really am an admirer of Bergman. I really love his films. I mean, he has, I cannot say has an influence on me, because that I feel it would be even pretentious to say that, but I love his films, and I still am watching them even after making these films. I could not get rid of them. I'm still watching them again and again, and it's really part of my life as a director, watching films of Bergman. So I mean, I don't even, I know it's funny, the Bergman Safari, and it has to be funny, but I did it at least 3 times. So I don't look at this like, I don't despise these people. I'm them too, So this is, so on the one hand, there is a real admiration and reverence, and yes, there is a tribute to Bergman. I cannot deny it. But on the other hand, yes, I wanted to be subversive, or I not that I wanted, but I thought it was part of the film. It had to be somehow. If I wanted to find my own language and express my own thing, it was my own quest. I never wanted to make a film that would look like a film of Bergman. I admired him too much for that. I wanted to make my own film, and I think I have my own thing to say. And I knew how risky it was, honestly, to go there and make a film calling it Bergman Island, like it was like giving, we have an expression in French saying donner le bâton pour se faire battre.
It translates literally to give the stick to be beaten with.
But I think it's really the way I work, I function, actually. I think all my films, each time when I have an idea where I think, oh, this is really a bad idea, really you're giving the stick to get beaten, that's when a film starts for me, really, each time. So.
Unfortunately, I'm getting the sign that we are out of time. You'll have an opportunity to hear Mia actually in conversation with a filmmaker we're showing next, Joachim Trier, who works with Anders. On Monday night, they'll be in a conversation about their work. So, but I want to thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.